I can't believe Pro Football Focus is pushing this as far as players who have the most approved in 2024. This is the entire NFL.
The entire NFL.
Deshaun Watson. That makes sense.
Yeah, of course.
With the Cleveland Browns. Russell Wilson with the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Yep.
That makes sense. Daniel Jones with the New York Giants.
Uh-huh.
That makes sense. Bryce Young with the Carolina Panthers. That makes sense. A little less sense, but makes some sense.
Yeah, I think it makes just because of the pressure that CJ put on him, I would say.
I was moving on to the next guy. I think Bryce Young makes a lot of sense. Bryce Young stunk last year.
No, that's what I mean about Bryce. Like, because
I was moving on to the next guy. I was saying, look, this one makes a little bit less sense. Calvin Ridley makes a little bit less sense. I don't think he was bad last year.
I disagree with you there. I think Calvin, because he hasn't been great in the NFL. Even before the suspension, he had a lot of injuries.
But he had 1,000 yards receiving and 8 touchdowns last year.
I know, but we used to talk about Calvin Ridley like he was like one of the best wide receivers in the NFL.
I don't really remember that, but I don't think he's got that much to prove here. I feel like him on this list, bizarre. Jedrick Willis Jr., I'll be honest, I don't know who that is.
Okay, good. Me neither.
Jedrick Willis Jr.? What?
Offensive lineman for either the Bucks or the...
He's on the Browns.
Browns, yeah.
But
because there's a Wills, too.
You couldn't have told me what position he played, honestly.
Watch out, Jedrick.
Yeah.
All eyes are on you.
So he's on this most approved in 2024 list.
We're going to be having a lot of Jedrick Wills conversations throughout the year.
I guess so.
Week after week. It's like Caitlin Clark.
And then Houston Texans corner Jeffrey Okudah is on this list. So he's on this list because he's a former top 5 pick. And he is on his 3rd team in 4 years. But I feel like no one's thinking going into this year, is Jeffrey Okudah finally going to look like a top 5 corner? As much as they're probably thinking to themselves, I don't know where Jeffrey Okudah plays. Is he still in the league? That's probably what they're thinking.
Yeah.
I suppose that means he does have a lot to prove, but I think it's weird to put him on the same level as guys like Deshaun Watson, Russell Wilson, and Daniel Jones, like this Pro Football Focus graphic did.
Yeah, because like those are guys who I guess Daniel Jones technically could lose his job to Drew Lock. I mean, like I know some people are kind of pushing that narrative a little bit, and technically Russell Wilson could lose his job to Justin Fields, but like Daniel Jones got paid. Russell Wilson has been paid. Deshaun Watson's been paid. Calvin Ridley's been paid. Bryce Young was the first overall pick. Okudah was the top 5 pick how many years ago now? Well, it's been 4 years?
2020.
He's on his 3rd team, and Jedrick Wills was the 10th pick in that draft. I think it's because they're up that high, like they were drafted that high. I guess you can make an argument, but
CJ Henderson was picked number 9, also on the Texans too.
So why is he not on the list?
It's weird that they added these 2 guys in. Honestly, if you're going to do a graphic that says which player has the most approved in 2024, you should have just left the quarterbacks on, because that's all that anybody really cares about ultimately as far as the national conversation about the sport. You want to talk about the quarterbacks first instead of some random guys who are top 10 picks that you're like, oh yeah, that guy was a top 10 pick. Not very good.
Yeah, it really should just be fantasy football positions. Like you can even talk me into like a wide receiver or a running back, because like Joe Mixon maybe has something to prove.
I would put Kyle Pitts on this list.
Kyle Pitts,
like Kyle Pitts, like after like what he's gone through in Atlanta, like it's time for him to like show up and be the tight end that everyone thought he was going to be coming out of Florida. Like he makes sense to me on this list. But Okudah's on his 3rd team. Like Russell Wilson's on his 3rd team because he got paid by the Broncos and it was a disaster. He moved on. Okudah's on his 3rd team because it's been a disaster everywhere. He's not been a good football player. I don't know what you're proving, especially when like it's OTAs, but who's getting the most run at the cornerback 2 spot?
That would be Kamari Lassiter, who they drafted in the 2nd round.
Yeah.
And from what DJ said, it sounds like he's significantly ahead of both CJ Henderson, another former top 10 pick from 2020, and Jeffrey Okudah, a former top 10 pick from 2020.
Jeff Okudah proved to me that you won't be playing in the UFL next year.
Yeah, like what are you proving?
He's proving that he won't be on the Birmingham Stallions next year.
I don't know why he's on this list. And I'm not even sure he's the Texan that...
The piece that they need.
Hey, you know what? Maybe it'll work out for them. Would you even have, like for you, Okudah as the number 1 Texan with the most approved this year?
No, we can answer that on the other side. What is the Houston Texan with the most approved this season? Joe, you asked the question before the commercial break. Who is the Houston Texan with the most approved? I don't think there's any debate on this one. It's Stephon Diggs.
Ooh, interesting.
Playing on a 1-year contract. the Bills won when they stopped forcing him the ball last year. He's in a crowded wide receiver room with Nico Collins and Tank Dell. I don't think there's any debate. The Houston Texan with the most to prove this coming season is Stephon Diggs, mainly to prove that he is capable of earning another contract from some other team, seeing as this is probably going to be his only season with the Houston Texans, the way wide receiver contracts are these days, very expensive.
Yeah, I don't know why he slipped my mind when I asked that question because it wasn't the first name that popped in my head. So it's probably the right answer. But I was thinking Jalen Petrie, of the guys who have more been on the team, of the Texan that has the most to prove this year. Because Petrie's rookie year was
really good.
It was really good. And then last year was such a disappointment. And when you talk about the questions that you have with this team, like safety is still probably the top question mark. Like, you have Stingley, so you have one good corner. But you have Jimmy Ward and you have Petrie. I don't expect much from Jimmy Ward. I expect a lot more from Jalen Petrie in 2024 if this team has the hopes and aspirations that it does. So I would say it's Diggs 1, to your point. I think you're right about that. And I would say Petrie's number 2 on my list.
I do think cornerback 2 is a bigger area of concern than the safety position. And while we're hearing good things about Kamari Lassiter at minicamp and OTAs, let's see that actually happen in a game. But to what you're saying, Petrie does have a lot to prove because last year he was a liability in coverage, and the year before he was opportunistic. He had 5 interceptions. He was always around the football, missing a lot of tackles, but always seemed to be in the right place at the right time. And last year, maybe it was because of just the different defensive scheme, not the same thing. It's going to be really curious between Jalen Petrie, and Dameon Pierce, who bounces back after the first year of the DeMeco Ryans, Bobby Slowick era for those two went very poorly.
I kind of feel like Pierce is just going to kind of fade away.
Why?
I just don't have any expectations for him.
Why not?
I don't know. To me, Joe Mixon and Jawar Jordan are going to be your primary backs.
Jawar Jordan, I would be shocked if he plays. I feel...
Dameon Pierce barely played last year.
Yeah, but Dameon Pierce, I think with Dameon Pierce, you clearly have something. I understand that it doesn't necessarily work in the system, but if you watch the film in 2022, he's clearly very talented. He can break tackles. He's powerful.
For sure.
Jawar Jordan does not check off any of the boxes for, at least based off of what very little I know of him coming out of Louisville. A guy who's drafted in the 5th round who doesn't seem to be that fast or that shifty. I'm not looking at him as somebody who steps in and has much of an impact. I think Pierce is going to bounce back this season.
I hope so.
Could be wrong. And, we're hoping that between he and Jalen Petrie, both of them bounce back. If you had to pick one or the other, I'm assuming you're going to pick Petrie over Pierce.
And it's more about playing time. Like, even if Pierce bounces back, it's going to be limited, right, with how much they're going to ask him to do. Mixon will be the primary guy. So I think they'll always kind of be like, I don't think we're going to walk out of this season and say, hey, Dameon Pierce, he's your number 1 running back. Move out of the Mixon contract after a season. Like, find your way out of it. Just bail on it and make Pierce your guy. I don't know if he's going to touch the ball enough to get to that point. So that's why I would lean Petrie.
I get you on that front, but I feel like that's not how we look at running back anymore. I think generally the bell cow guy is dead because if you have only one guy and you use him all the time and then all of a sudden he's hurt or he's banged up, you're kind of screwed offensively. I feel like optimally they're using Mixon a lot, but they're also using Pierce a lot more than they did last season. It was crazy that there were games where he was only getting 1 carry, to your point, and that does scream wasn't a fit, but again, it's offseason. We've heard a lot of good things about this guy, though. Coming back this year, obviously remains to be seen what he does on the field.
I mean, to your point, like going into the offseason, I thought that they were going to sign 2 running backs. I thought that they were going to move on from Dameon Pierce completely because of what we just talked about with the limited playing time he got last year and how they were really the most unbalanced team. Where like most teams in the NFL do have 2 running backs, to what you're saying, that they share the carries between, and the Texans completely avoided that. So I thought they were going to get like a Mixon and honestly, like a Stingley, like a new version of Stingley, like having 2 guys for their backfield and
new
kind
version of Stingley,
like a sign Joe Mixon and Stingley.
What do you mean by Stingley?
Not Stingley. Singletary.
Singletary. Gotcha. Okay.
Bad brain day. So I was like, why does he understand? And I was like, duh, no, I'm saying the name wrong. I was like, I'm so confused right now.
I don't know. No, I was like, is there a guy I'm not aware of?
No, but like sign 2 running backs and then kind of fade Pierce out of the equation. But they didn't do that. So that means they must have some faith that he can be the guy.
You can't move on from Pierce entirely just because of the rookie contract and all that, but I really think there's something there. Maybe I'm going to be the last one on this island, like that random dude who was found in the jungle decades after World War II, who still thought the war was going on.